My wife and I bought that house for a price that could only be called ridiculous. An old but solid log house, an overgrown apple orchard, and nearly 3 acres of land included. All of it in a dying rural town where even the mobile grocery truck came only once a week. For us, burned-out city freelancers, it felt like paradise. The only thing that bothered us was the well. It stood right in the middle of the yard, built from moss-covered stone blocks, with a heavy oak windlass and a crooked, half-rotten roof. The realtor, hurriedly signing the paperwork, casually mentioned that no one had used the well's water in years, saying it was easier to drill a modern well instead. We didn't think much of it at the time. The first month was pure bliss. We were fixing up the house, breathing in the thick air scented with wild herbs and enjoying the silence. And then, one moonless night in August, I heard it for the first time. It was a quiet, broken sound, like someone sobbing. It came from the yard. I thought it was a bird or some small animal, but the sound repeated itself with a dull, depressing rhythm. A quiet sob, a pause, and then again. I went to the window. The yard was empty, and only the black opening of the well stood out against the grass wet with dew. The sound was coming from there. "Do you hear that?" Emily whispered from the darkness of the bedroom. She wasn't asleep either. "I hear it," I said. "It's probably just water moving down there, or the wind echoing through the logs." But I didn't believe my own words. The sound was too alive. It sounded like a woman crying, trying to do it as quietly as possible so no one would hear her grief. From that night on, it happened every single night. A soft, muffled crying rose from the darkness of the well. We stopped sleeping. During the day, everything felt normal. Sunlight, birds, work. But as soon as dusk settled in, a sticky, cold fear began to grow inside me as I waited for the sound to return. Emily grew pale and tense. I tried to find a rational explanation. I lowered a flashlight down on a rope, inspected the stone walls, but found nothing that could possibly make that sound. After a couple of weeks, unable to take it anymore, I went to see our only neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Harper, who lived at the far end of the road. She listened in silence, staring off to the side with faded, almost colorless eyes. "So, it's crying," she said calmly, without surprise. "That means it's awake and hungry." "What's awake?" I asked. "Mrs. Harper, what are you talking about?" "It's an old well," she said. "Our grandfathers dug it. It remembers a lot, especially women's tears. When a girl suffered because of unhappy love, she would come here and cry into it. And the well listened and listened and took her tears along with her sorrow. Sometimes," she paused, "sometimes it took the girl too." She crossed herself. "The last one was Lily, our local mail carrier. About 10 years ago, she went out to her plot of land and never came back. We searched and searched, vanished without a trace, like she sank into the ground." She looked straight at me. "Don't mess with it," she said quietly. "Don't wake up something evil." Her words only strengthened my resolve. We couldn't live like this. We couldn't sell the house after pouring all our savings into it. This had to end, once and for all. There was only one solution: drain the well, clean it down to the bottom and find out what was really there. We rented a powerful industrial water pump. On Saturday morning, I lowered the heavy hose into the black water, and the machine came to life with a dull, angry roar, spewing a muddy stream across the grass. The water drained slowly. Ring by ring, The soaked stone walls revealed their dark, slick surface. Emily stood beside me, gripping my sleeve tightly. After 3 hours, the pump choked and spat out the last portion of filthy sludge. The water was gone. I grabbed a high-powered flashlight and shined it down. The bottom was covered with a thick layer of black silt, and from that silt, like monstrous underwater weeds, something else was growing. Long, tangled strands, a lot of them, blonde, dark red-grey. They were intertwined, forming a solid, shifting carpet that covered the entire bottom of the well. They were human hair. There was so much of it that it felt as if, 10 meters below, lay the scalp of some unimaginable giant. My stomach turned. Emily screamed and staggered back. This wasn't just horrifying. It was impossible. Hair doesn't preserve like that in water. And where could so much of it come from? That same day, we called the authorities. A tired county sheriff arrived with 2 deputies. They stared down into the well for a long time, shaking their heads, and then called in the state rescue team. The rescuers tried to hook the mass with a grappling tool, but it only sank into it. They tried lowering one of their men down on a winch. He touched the surface with his boots and immediately screamed to be pulled back up. "It's alive," he shouted when they hauled him out. "It's warm, and it's moving." All work was halted until forensic investigators could arrive. And that night, real hell began. The crying stopped. Instead, a whisper came from the drained well, soft, coaxing, seeping up from the ground itself. And it was calling Emily, by name. We barricaded ourselves inside the house, but the whisper followed us in. It came from the kitchen sink, from the drain in the bathtub. Every pipe in the house was connected to the same underground vein. It was no longer crying. It was asking to be let in. I looked at my wife, frozen with terror, and realized that no police force could help us. I remembered Mrs. Harper's words. It takes the tears along with the sorrow. That thing, that well, didn't feed on flesh. It fed on grief. For decades, women had come to it, pouring out their pain, and it took their suffering, and them along with it, leaving behind only their hair, like a grotesque trophy. By draining it, we had taken away its food and awakened its hunger. And now it had found a new victim, my Emily. And then I knew what had to be done. It was a mad, desperate plan. "Emily, listen to me," I said, gripping her shoulders. "All our old photographs, the letters from your ex, the ones that made you suffer, my bankruptcy papers, everything that ever brought us pain, everything we regret, bring it all here." We gathered an entire box of artifacts from our past, unhappy lives, everything we had tried to leave behind by moving here. I carried it outside to the very edge of the well, from which it was no longer whispering, but nearly screaming my wife's name. I set the contents on fire. When the flames greedily took hold of the paper and cardboard, I tipped the box over. The burning heap fell into the black void. For a moment, it was bright down there, and I saw it. The hair began to move, rising like thousands of snakes reaching for the fire. A sigh came from the well, a sound like relief, like satisfaction. And then, silence. For the first time in weeks, absolute dead silence. The next day, I ordered a concrete truck. The workers glanced at me like I was insane as they filled the mouth of the well to the very top. We still live in that house. Where the well once stood, there is now a smooth grey circle where we place our lounge chairs in summer. The police closed the case, writing it off as a mass hallucination and an unexplained natural phenomenon. Life returned to normal. But I know it didn't die. It's just sleeping there, under tons of concrete. It's full. We gave it all of our past grief. But sometimes, when I walk barefoot across the yard, I feel the ground beneath my feet vibrating, faintly, deeply, as if, far below, a huge, satisfied heart is slowly pumping not blood, but other people's tears. And I understand that we can never leave this place. Never. Because now we are its guardians. And our main task is to never be unhappy again. Because if we weaken, it will wake up. And it will be very, very hungry. I never liked that house. Even before anything happened, it felt wrong. Too quiet. Too heavy. As if the walls were listening, storing every sound, every breath, and never letting them go. The villagers avoided talking about it. If someone brought it up, they would lower their voices, glance away, and quickly change the subject. I noticed that no one ever laughed near that place. Even the dogs refused to come close, stopping at the edge of the yard, whining softly and pulling back on their leashes. The house stood at the very end of the road, pressed against the forest. The trees grew too close, their branches hanging over the roof like dark fingers. In the evenings, when the sun went down, shadows gathered there faster than anywhere else in the village. They told me the old woman had died quietly, in her sleep. No screams, no struggle, just gone. That's what they said, but the way they said it made my skin crawl, as if they were repeating words they didn't quite believe themselves. I was the one who had to go there, to check the house, to make sure everything was locked, sealed, left untouched until the 40 days had passed. That was the custom. Everyone knew it, everyone followed it. I told myself there was nothing to be afraid of. Death was natural. Houses were just wood and stone. Superstitions were for old people and children. Still, when I pushed the gate open, my chest tightened. The air inside the yard felt colder, heavier. It smelled faintly of damp earth, even though it hadn't rained. The front door opened too easily. No creak, no resistance. Inside the house was dark, but not empty. I could feel it immediately, as if something remained behind, lingering in the corners, watching me cross the threshold. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. That was my first mistake. Inside, the air felt stale, as if the house had been sealed for far longer than a few days. The smell of damp wood mixed with something heavier, something earthy, the kind of scent you notice in basements and cellars where the ground is always close. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. The hallway stretched ahead of me, narrow and dim, with doors on both sides. The silence pressed in from all directions, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the faint sound of my own breathing. I walked slowly, careful not to touch anything. The floorboards responded under my feet with a muted creak, not loud enough to echo, but loud enough to feel like a warning. Somewhere deeper in the house, something shifted, or at least I thought it did, and I paused, listening, my heart beating far too fast for no real reason. The kitchen was exactly as it had been left. A cup on the table, a folded cloth near the sink. Everything looked ordinary, painfully ordinary, and that made it worse. It felt like the house was pretending, like it was waiting. I remembered what people had told me. After death, the house should remain untouched, no cleaning, no rearranging, especially not the cellar, especially during the first 40 days. Those words echoed in my mind as I noticed the cellar door in the corner of the kitchen, half hidden behind a chair. I don't know why I looked at it. I told myself it was just habit, just a quick check. The handle was cold when my fingers brushed against it, colder than the rest of the room, and a faint shiver ran up my arm. I pulled my hand back immediately, annoyed at myself for reacting that way. There was nothing down there, just old jars, tools, maybe some dust. Still, my gaze kept returning to the door, drawn to it as if by something quiet and persistent. That was when I heard it. Not a sound exactly, but a sensation, like movement beneath the floor, slow and careful, as if someone was shifting their weight in the dark. I told myself it was settling wood. Old houses always made noises. I forced myself to breathe steadily and turned away from the cellar door. I should have left then, but instead I stayed. Night fell unnoticed. I didn't turn on the lights right away, letting the darkness settle naturally, as if the house itself was deciding how much it wanted to reveal. Shadows thickened in the corners, stretching and merging, and the familiar rooms began to feel subtly wrong, slightly rearranged by the absence of someone who had once filled them. I lay down on the couch in the living room, fully dressed, telling myself it was only for a moment. The silence pressed against my ears, deep and heavy, the kind of silence that feels intentional. Somewhere in the walls, wood expanded and contracted with a soft, tired groan, and every sound seemed closer than it should have been. Sleep did not come. My thoughts kept circling back to the cellar door, to the way the handle had felt under my fingers, to the strange certainty that something below had noticed me noticing it. I tried to laugh it off in my head, tried to be rational, reminding myself that grief does strange things to the mind, especially in places tied so closely to childhood. At some point, I heard footsteps. They were faint at first, barely more than a suggestion, slow and uneven, as if someone were walking carefully, testing the floor with each step. I sat up, holding my breath, listening harder than I ever had before. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from inside the house. I told myself it was impossible. The house was empty. I was alone. Still, the footsteps continued, moving from one room to another, lingering, then stopping, as if whoever was walking was unsure where to go next. My chest tightened. The air felt colder, heavier, harder to breathe. I stayed completely still, afraid that even the smallest movement would draw attention to me. The footsteps slowly faded, dissolving into silence, leaving behind a tension that refused to disappear. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt stretched, distorted, unreliable. Then I heard it again, this time closer. Not footsteps now, but a soft dragging sound, low and deliberate, as if something were being pulled across the floor. It came from the direction of the kitchen. I stood up despite every instinct screaming at me to stay where I was. My legs felt weak, unsteady, but I forced myself forward, step by careful step, toward the kitchen doorway. I stopped just short of entering, peering into the darkness. The cellar door was open. I stared at it, unable to move, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. I was certain I had left it closed. I was certain I hadn't touched it. And yet there it was, gaping open. A rectangle of darkness leading down into something that felt far deeper than it should have been. Cold air rose from below, carrying with it that same damp, earthy smell, stronger now, mixed with something else, something old and unsettling. I stood there frozen, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever was down there was no longer content to wait. And somehow, without meaning to, without fully deciding to, I stepped closer. I froze, my body refusing to move, though my mind screamed at me to run. The darkness of the cellar stretched downward, deep and endless, and a cold, earthy draft rose from it, carrying a faint whisper of something alive, something waiting. Then I felt it, fingers long and rigid, brushing against my arm, cold and unnerving. I tried to pull away, but my muscles refused to respond. The touch was deliberate, patient, aware. It held me in place. A sound came from below. Not a voice, not quite. A rasping, wheezing noise that seemed to echo through the walls themselves, wrapping around me. And then words, a whisper, close to my ear, from somewhere I could not see. Too early. You came too early. Panic gripped me like a vice. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my balance. My flashlight wavered in my hand, casting shadows that twisted and lengthened across the walls, making the room seem far larger than it was. I could hear steps ascending the stairs, slow, deliberate, the kind of movement that carries certainty and menace in every step. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I only watched as she appeared at the top of the stairs. Her head tilted unnaturally, hair falling across a face that was grey, lifeless, and yet unmistakably hers. Eyes wide, unblinking, fixed on me with a depth that made my chest tighten. Empty sockets filled with intent, with something beyond comprehension. She began to descend, hand trailing along the railing, nails scraping lightly against the wood. Each step echoed in my skull. The house felt alive now, attentive, breathing along with her. Too early, she hissed again, the words stretching, dragging across the air like heavy silk. Too early. You came too early. My body betrayed me. I fell, the flashlight rolling away, the beam dancing across walls, floor, and the figure approaching. Her steps continued, measured, inevitable. Every inch closer burned into my awareness. And then silence. For a moment, the kind of silence that presses in and leaves your ears ringing. Then a faint creak, upstairs. Floorboards, slow and deliberate. She was still moving, still searching, still here. I backed toward the door, my fingers fumbling for the handle. The lock jammed, my breath hitched. She was coming closer, closer with every heartbeat. I could feel her, smell the dampness that clung to her, the old, earthy scent of something unfinished, something waiting for its time. Morning found me slumped on the kitchen floor, staring blankly at the wall, unable to speak. The house was quiet, the cellar was sealed, planks nailed over the entrance in a cross, a futile barrier. Yet sometimes, late at night, the soft creak of steps still reaches me, measured, slow, and relentless, and a whisper that trails through the rooms, curling around corners, brushing against walls. 40 days. This strange story happened not so long ago. A family of 4, Michael Carter, his wife Rebecca, and their 2 daughters, Emily and Grace, were driving to visit an old family friend named Thomas. He lived on the edge of a half-abandoned rural settlement, somewhere deep in the countryside. The road was unfamiliar, but Thomas had given detailed directions over the phone, carefully explaining every turn. At some point, they missed the correct turn and took a narrow side road instead. At first, no one noticed anything unusual, but after about 5 minutes, the scenery began to change. The trees grew closer together, the light dimmed, and the cracked asphalt slowly gave way to a rough dirt road. Another 15 minutes passed. Then the road simply ended. Michael turned off the engine and stepped out of the car, listening to the silence. There were no houses, no signs, no sounds of life, just trees, endless forest. He called Thomas, trying to explain where they were, but the connection was poor. Through the static, Michael caught only fragments. Turn back while it's still light. Don't go into the woods. Hurry. The call dropped. Realizing they were in the wrong place, Michael got back into the car and tried to start the engine again. Nothing. The engine refused to respond. Rebecca glanced at her watch. It was just after 2 p.m. They weren't panicking yet. Thinking they had time, the family stepped out of the car to stretch their legs and walk a little. Michael stayed near the vehicle, hoping the signal would return so he could call for help. But the signal was gone completely. The girls wandered deeper between the trees, and without realizing how far they had gone, they suddenly found themselves standing among old graves. A cemetery, wooden crosses, stone markers, some tilted with age, others standing unnaturally straight. As they walked between the graves, something felt wrong. Too quiet, too orderly. Then Emily noticed someone. Farther away, partially hidden behind a headstone, stood a lone woman. She wasn't moving. She was watching them. The girls froze. The woman's face was hard to see, but her gaze felt heavy, deliberate. As soon as Grace realized the woman was hiding, not approaching, fear took over. The girls ran. They didn't look back. They ran all the way to the car, breathless, stumbling over roots, calling for their parents. Hearing their story, Michael didn't dismiss it. He felt a tightening in his chest. He told Rebecca to stay with the girls and went to check for himself. He walked no more than 50 yards into the forest before he saw the first grave, then another and another. The cemetery stretched deeper than it should have. What unsettled him most was that every grave looked cared for. No overgrown weeds, no neglect. On one grave there were fresh wildflowers, as if someone had placed them there that very day. Michael assumed there must be a nearby settlement. Cemeteries didn't exist on their own. He kept walking. 100 yards, then another 100. The graves didn't end, and then he noticed something else. The same last name appeared again and again on the headstones. The very same name that was written on the grave with the fresh flowers. A chill ran down his spine. It felt as if the cemetery was closing in on him. Suddenly overwhelmed by a suffocating sense of being trapped, Michael turned and ran back toward the road, his heart pounding, his breath burning in his chest. When Michael reached the car, Rebecca was still holding the girls close, trying to calm them down. Emily and Grace were shaking, speaking over each other, repeating that the woman was real, that she had been watching them from behind a gravestone. Michael didn't argue. He could still feel the cold pressure in his chest from what he had seen among the graves. He made a quick decision. Staying there made no sense. They would leave on foot. By his estimate, they hadn't driven more than 12 miles from the main road. If they followed the dirt track back, they should reach the highway before nightfall. They grabbed only the essentials, locked the car out of habit, and started walking. It was around 3 p.m. At first, the walk felt almost normal. The road was dry, the air was warm. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and the forest looked harmless, almost welcoming. Only the occasional mosquito reminded them that they were far from civilization. An hour passed, then another. The light began to change. Shadows stretched longer across the road. The buzzing grew louder. The mosquitoes multiplied, surrounding them in thick, relentless clouds. By 6:30, the sun slipped below the horizon, and the forest seemed to close in all at once. Michael swatted at the air in disbelief. "I've never seen mosquitoes like this in September," he muttered. "They're going to eat us alive," Rebecca said quietly. They tried to move faster, even to run. But without flashlights, someone always stumbled, catching a foot on roots or uneven ground. They were forced to slow down. There was nowhere to hide, no shelter, no clearing, just trees and darkness. Eventually, exhausted and desperate, they huddled together on the side of the road, wrapping themselves in jackets, trying to keep warm as the night air grew colder. No one slept. The forest was alive with sound. The constant high-pitched whine of mosquitoes filled their ears, unbroken, endless. Morning came slowly. With the first light, hope faded. They could finally see what the darkness had hidden. They were lost. The road was gone. In every direction, there were only trees. After a brief, silent discussion, Michael decided they would head south, using the sun as their guide. The sky was clear. It was the only option they had. They walked for several miles. Then Michael saw someone ahead, a human figure. A woman stood among the trees, calmly picking wildflowers as if this was an ordinary morning. She looked up when she noticed them, greeting them softly, without surprise, without fear, as though she had been expecting them all along. Michael explained everything: the broken car, the night in the forest, the road they couldn't find. The woman listened quietly. Then she raised her hand and pointed deeper into the woods. "The main road is that way," she said softly. "It's not far." With renewed hope, the family started moving in the direction the woman had indicated. The girls clung to their parents, trying to stay close. Their steps were hurried, but careful, as the forest still held hidden roots and uneven ground. Each shadow seemed heavier, each sound sharper. As they walked, Emily whispered to her father, "Dad, isn't that the woman we saw at the cemetery?" She shivered. Grace nodded. "She was spying on us back there." Michael didn't respond at first. He only kept walking, following the path suggested, his eyes scanning the forest, alert for any movement, any hint of danger. Time passed strangely. Every step felt both long and fleeting. The trees seemed to bend closer, as if watching, as if the forest itself were alive. After about 20 minutes, a familiar sight appeared in the distance: their car. Relief surged through them, but something felt wrong. The forest had circled them, shifted somehow, and the car's position seemed impossibly close and yet unreachable. Michael's jaw tightened. "We need to move, but I'll go ahead alone this time," he said firmly. His voice betrayed fatigue. He hadn't slept all night. Hunger and thirst gnawed at him, but he forced himself to keep going. He needed to secure help and guide his family safely out. The dirt road stretched endlessly before him. Michael ran, every step heavy with exhaustion, every breath loud in his own ears. Hours passed, yet he kept running, driven by instinct, by the need to save his family. Eventually, he reached the asphalt highway. 7 miles remained to safety, and each one felt like climbing a mountain. But he pushed through. Finally, he reached the main road and flagged down a rescue vehicle. It was just past 8 in the evening when the emergency responders arrived. 2 men stepped out, one with a search dog. "Come on, I'll show you," Michael said almost instinctively, feeling the urgency in his chest. Night had fallen completely. The darkness seemed heavier here, thicker. As they followed Michael through the woods, he finally saw the car. But there was no sign of Rebecca, Emily, or Grace inside. Panic surged anew. He led the rescuers toward the cemetery, trusting only his intuition. 50 yards in, then another 100. He shifted left slightly, trying to recall landmarks. But something impossible had happened. The cemetery seemed to vanish in the darkness. Michael shook his head, blaming sleep deprivation, hoping the morning would clarify everything. All night, the flashlights cut through the forest darkness. Michael's eyes strained, his body aching from exhaustion. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made his heart jump. But there was no sign of his family. The forest stretched endlessly, silent except for the faint whisper of the wind through the trees. By morning, hope had nearly vanished. Michael trudged back to the rescue vehicle, leaning on its hood for support. 2 sleepless nights and a day of relentless searching had left him drained, numb. "There's no cemetery here," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "What cemetery?" asked one of the rescuers, confused. "There's nothing here. Never was." Michael's hands shook. Did I imagine it? How could I? Even the mosquitoes. Gone. Where did it all go? A week passed. The authorities searched the surrounding area thoroughly, but no trace of Rebecca, Emily, or Grace was found. Michael learned that others had disappeared in these woods before, mostly foragers, berry pickers, people who wandered off the trail. About 4 years ago, a man in his 50s went missing under similar circumstances. His wife searched for him, but she too vanished in the same forest, never to return. Thomas had tried to warn Michael over the phone beforehand, but he never got the chance to explain properly. Soon after, Michael himself disappeared. Locals whispered that he couldn't bear to be alone, that he had gone back searching for the cemetery, searching for his family, and that he had seen things no one else could understand. Since then, people avoid these woods entirely. They are thick, strange, and unpredictable. Even today, travelers in this region speak in hushed tones about the Carter family and the vanishing cemetery. The woods lie in Jefferson County, somewhere in the remote countryside of the United States. Those who know the stories keep away, fearing the same fate. Lost, wandering, trapped in a place where reality bends and the forest itself decides who may leave and who stays forever. This happened a few years ago in a small town in Ohio, when our family gathered for my Uncle Michael's funeral. He had always been a cheerful, loud, almost overly optimistic man, the kind of person who laughed easily and loudly. Seeing him lying still in the coffin felt unreal, like a badly staged scene from a play. The room smelled of flowers and candle wax. People spoke in hushed tones, occasionally sighing, occasionally wiping their eyes. I stood near the wall at first, watching from a distance. Something about the way he looked made me uneasy. His face seemed too calm, too composed. And then I noticed it, the faintest hint of a smile. At first, I told myself it was just how his lips had settled. Funeral homes do their work carefully. Expressions can look different under certain lighting. I tried not to stare, but the longer I looked, the clearer it became. His lips were curved upward, not dramatically, not exaggerated, just enough to make my stomach tighten. I stepped closer to the coffin, pretending I wanted to pay my respects. The overhead lights cast soft shadows across his face. His eyes were closed. His hands were folded neatly over his chest. And yet, that smile, it didn't belong there. A few minutes passed, and I still couldn't pull my eyes away from the coffin. Uncle Michael's smile seemed wider now. It was no longer subtle. The corners of his mouth had lifted higher, stretching unnaturally. The conversations around the room began to blur. Laughter from a distant corner faded. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning felt distant. I leaned toward my father and whispered, "Dad, look at him." He glanced over briefly. "What about him?" he asked quietly. "His face." My father stepped closer this time. He stared for a moment longer than before, then frowned. "I think you're imagining things." But I wasn't. I moved closer to the coffin. With every step, a cold sensation slid slowly down my spine. The air near him felt different, heavier, still. When I finally stood directly beside him, my breath caught. His teeth were visible now. His lips had stretched further, forming something closer to a grin than a peaceful smile. His skin remained pale and waxen. His eyes were closed, his body completely still. But the mouth looked alive. I swallowed hard and stepped back. "It's just post-mortem muscle movement," I told myself. "It happens. It's natural." But deep down, something inside me resisted that explanation. The dead don't slowly change expressions. They don't smile wider. And yet, he was. As the evening came to an end and people prepared to close the coffin before heading to the cemetery, I forced myself to look one last time, and I froze. His expression had changed again. His mouth was slightly open now. The lips pulled back farther than before, teeth fully visible beneath the soft chapel lights. It wasn't a smile anymore. It looked like silent laughter. Something stretched, something almost joyful, but wrong. My father stepped beside me. This time, he didn't dismiss it. He stared. The room grew quieter. A few relatives shifted uneasily, though no one said anything out loud. It felt as if we were witnessing something we weren't meant to see. His eyes remained closed, but there was something about the way his face looked, as if he had seen something beyond us, beyond the room, beyond grief, and whatever it was, he liked it. They finally closed the lid. Just before it was sealed, I thought I saw the faintest tremor beneath his eyelids. Not fully movement, just enough to make my heart pound. We buried him the next morning at a small cemetery outside town. Afterward, people left quickly. No one lingered. Weeks passed. I tried to convince myself it had been stress, shock, grief playing tricks on my mind. But later, a family friend mentioned that something similar had happened at another funeral in a nearby county. The same widening smile, the same uneasy silence, the same refusal to speak about it afterward. Some say it's a sign that the deceased is at peace, that whatever waits beyond this life isn't frightening to them. Others say it's just biology. I still don't know what to believe, but I remember that expression. And sometimes, late at night, I find myself wondering, what did he see? And why did it make him smile?